Kornhauser.
I am Bobby Hunt.
And thank you guys for tuning in for another edition of Shoot the J. Shoot it! Balling out here.
Yeah, leave it hanging. Yuck.
Yeah.
We don't need to talk.
All right. So let's jump right into it. We are on the clock, Bob, because at 9 o'clock, my good pastor and crew have, I believe, a boxing show coming up at 9 o'clock. But either way, Mike and them are going to be on, so that should be a good show. Hope you guys stay in tuned after we're done here. But thank you guys for tuning in. It's been a while. We have a lot to cover, so let's jump right into it, Bob. We know the Golden State Warriors were crowned champions in our preview shows when we were doing those with Steve and Mike from the beginning. I got the stats right here. So I had Golden State in 7. Bob, you and Steve both had Golden State in 6, and Mike had Boston in 7. Mike was wrong, and I love saying that out loud. It's one of my favorite things in the whole world. I was also wrong. Although I picked the right winner, I was wrong in the game's semantics. Kudos to you and Steve. The Celtics weren't quite right. They weren't ready. Jason Tatum, so much for top 5. He wasn't ready. And Curry and them have a dynasty going. And now the question becomes, is Curry one of the, not only maybe the best point guard of all time, but is Curry going to finish as a top 10, maybe higher all-time player, regardless of position? But what are your final thoughts on the NBA Finals, Bob?
Well, first, got to talk about getting it right. I'll take my bouquet of roses, as will Steve. Clearly that Indiana University education goes a long way. That's why we got it right.
Do me a favor, Bob. Don't break your arm, all right, live on the internet, stroking yourself, all right?
I might have already, right before this show. Who knows?
I believe it.
Anyway, me and Steve were right. Granted, though, I wouldn't give you much flack, or really even Mike. Now, he got it wrong, so he's the most wrong. He got the wrong team. But with that said, we all figured it was going to be 6 or 7 games. These teams are fairly evenly matched, and that is what we got for the most part. The only thing that's crazy about the finals is that every game was decided by double digits. In our second show that we did about this NBA Finals with Mike and Steve, I talked about how it's weird how every game so far, I think we were at game 4, I think, right before game 4 when we did that podcast. So I was saying, even though these games have mostly been close, even if it's not all 4 quarters, these have all been decided by 10 points or more. And that's what wound up happening. But it wasn't a bad series. It was still entertaining. A lot of the games were close. It's just one or the other, the Warriors 4 times, pulled away at the end and were able to get it done. So they win their 4th championship in 8 years. Like you mentioned, Steph Curry vaulting up the all-time list now that he has not only a 4th ring, but he has that coveted Finals MVP that he had yet to win. He was outstanding, averaging 32 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, 43 or 44% from the field. Just unbelievable. I think even higher than that. I think I had 48%. Obviously doing his thing from 3. He was outstanding. He had a bad game 5, but he bounced back game 6 and was huge. So they win. And, hey, the Celtics got there a little bit unexpectedly. Now, the way the season turned out, them finishing 2nd, no one was really shocked when they beat Miami, albeit in 7 games, and it did come down to the wire. But the Celtics shouldn't be too upset. They arrived a little early. They have 2 young superstars, or at least stars, and I wouldn't necessarily call either of them superstars quite yet, but Tatum's getting close to that. But it was a disappointing end for them. Jason Tatum no-showed the last couple of games, especially the final game 6. What did he have, 13 points or something disgusting like that? Jaylen Brown had a big game at least, so he showed up. They still have their own questions that they need to answer in the offseason, but so does every team. But the Warriors are on top of the hill again, and Curry's an all-time great. We know that already.
Yep. So, was there anything that you learned after watching this finals between the Boston Celtics and Golden State?
I learned that Andrew Wiggins is the 2nd best player on the Warriors now. That's what I learned.
That's gross.
Clay is still really good. He can still play at a high level, no doubt. But I think this is a big confidence booster for Wiggins. He's rewriting the script on his career, on the narrative there. And he was the better player than Clay, at least in this series. Now, yes, maybe that won't hold, but Wiggins is obviously much younger. He was number 1 overall pick. He's in an environment where now he's succeeding and playing both ends of the floor. Now, do I expect him to average damn near 9 rebounds a game? No, like he did in this finals, having huge game 4 and game 5 rebound totals. No, but he showed that going forward, he's really the youngest big time player on this team. Kevon Looney's a free agent and not all that special. We know Draymond doesn't score. Jordan Poole, obviously a really nice player, but he's not a big wing defender like Wiggins is. Now he can fill it up. He has a microwave out there. He averaged 13 points per game, just averaging 20 minutes a game in this finals. But I think that's what I learned and took away from it is Wiggins can really play both ends of the floor, and Klay Thompson is 33 or so now, and clearly on the back nine of his career, especially after so many injuries. I hate to say it, but that's the fact of life, especially in sports. So I think Wiggins having 7 or 8 years on Klay Thompson is well positioned to be that next guy for them.
And the good thing is for the Golden State Warriors is we're going to delve into some rumors and stuff later on, but to give you a little taste, Golden State's looking to move their first round pick in this year's draft, which is in the late first round, and they're looking to move out of the first round and get future considerations because their roster is essentially set. The top 10 pretty much are returning as is. All their starters, their key young players, Wiseman, etc., Moody, Kuminga, they're obviously going to be coming back, and the Golden State Warriors want to integrate those young guys more into the lineup. So one of the rumors popped up over the last 24 to 48 hours was that Golden State is indeed going to probably move out of the first round, probably maybe get a future first or maybe a couple seconds. Who knows what they can pull, but they're not going to be making any picks in this year's draft, at least not in the first round. And maybe in the second round even too. That wouldn't be a surprise either. But Golden State's in a good spot. They're hopeful that these young guys can step up and really take that next level in their development, both personally and in the system. They're hoping Wiseman gets healthy because he would add a really, really nice element of size and skill at the 5 position for them. We know that's been an issue for them in bigger lineups and whatnot. They tend to go small when Looney is not on the court. They have great Draymond at the 5. So they'll be fine. For me, I learned that it's best not to fall in love with the flavor of the week. Keep those hot takes to yourself. Let's get Bayless and Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman, okay, say the crazy things, declaring certain guys top 5, Jason Tatum, declaring that some guy is the best at his position all the time. Let them make the crazy declarations because you might end up sounding stupid. It's great to have an opinion. It's great to, feel strongly in your opinion. I mean, kudos to Mike, right or wrong. I mean, when he has an opinion, that's his opinion. You don't sway him, and he will not back down. He will double down no matter how stupid his opinion sounds. Like, I have plenty of examples, but I'm not going to go into it right now because the man can't defend himself. But he's right, he's wrong. Regardless, he has his opinion. He sticks to it. So that's all great and fine and dandy. But when people were saying, "Oh, Jason Tatum's one of the top 5 players in the NBA," after that Philly series, or was it the Philly? No, the Heat series. After the Heat series, or during the Heat series, they were talking about Tatum as a top 5 player moving forward. I laughed at it then. I thought it was just the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. You're going to put a guy who's not won a chip, has done nothing in the NBA. So what, All-Star game, what do you do? Congratulations. He looks great, looks like a good young player, but you're going to put him top 5 over some of these legends that we got out there?
Maybe putting him top 5, and I agree with you on that part, but he was hot, and he was first-team All-NBA this year. He's made it to 3 conference finals in his career, so it's not like he's done absolutely nothing. But at the same time, yes, I generally agree with your overall point of the flavor of the week, flavor of the month, whatever it is, and the fact that all of a sudden, yes, everyone's talking about him, hyping him up. Really good player, maybe on that trajectory, but yeah, you're not putting him over Giannis or obviously now Curry. There was some doubts about some people putting him below Tatum. That was laughable. Obviously, so Giannis, Joker, Embiid even, Kevin Durant. He's not better than those guys, not yet at least. Now, some of those guys are 33, 34, getting old now, but they're not having Tatum pass them quite yet.
That's what I'm saying. Now let's move on from the NBA Finals. One last thing for the NBA Finals. I know that the NBA is moving more towards the three and moving more towards positionless basketball and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, Golden State won very simply because their defense was better. That was something that really shined. That was really, really clear to me over the last couple of games of that series. Was as good as Boston's defense has been throughout the season, and especially on their run since end of January or whatever it was, middle January, and they're running the playoffs and all the analytics showing how good their defense was. Yeah, the Boston Celtics defense was right, but Golden State's was better in key spots. And for all the talk about Tatum being a top 5, top 10, whatever, that stuff aside, as good as Boston was, as good as Tatum and Brown are, they weren't ready. I said before the series when we were making our picks, for me, it came down to the fact that Golden State had been there before. They knew what they were going through. They knew that there were going to be ups and downs, and they knew how to navigate that stuff. They knew going in, you're not going to sweep the Celtics. It's not going to be a cakewalk. It's going to be a tough series. It's going to be physical. And when Boston hits you with those counters where they go on a 21-4 run and they go down from down 15 to up 5, with 8-10 minutes left on the clock or something like that, you're going to have to buckle down and step up. And that's when the best players step up in the brightest moments. That's why Curry is one of the greatest all time. That's why Curry is one of the top 5 players in the NBA, because he stepped up and he got those around him to step up. And that was key.
Well, I do want to add, just since we are wrapping the finals, we should give it its due. It was, the end of the season. We crowned a champion. It was all well and good. And it was a fun series, I think, even with mentioning games being decided by double digits. But not only takeaways, but I'm also wondering, what did you feel great about that happened in the series, and maybe something that you regret? I'll start with a regret or like a wrong pick even. But I thought Game 6 Clay was going to show up and show out, but that did not happen at all. So I'll take the L on that. It's all well and good. He only had 12 points, 5 rebounds. He was awful. 5 of 20. I'd be lying if that didn't impact me saying what I said about Wiggins, but Wiggins also did great himself, closing out strong those last 3 games. And obviously I'm satisfied with getting the pick right, but one thing and why you reminded me with some of what you're saying is it is a long series, and I did mention in our original preview that they would wear them down, that they were a deeper team. Now, granted, no team's really going 10 guys at this point. They're really relying on pretty much 8,
right?
Or some teams even only 7 guys in the rotation. But I just felt like they would wear them out, especially defensively, with guys like Gary Payton coming back. Even Iguodala, though he didn't play a lot, he did play a decent amount in that Game 1 before Payton had come back for Game 2. But basically, they were deeper, and they were able to wear them out, and especially we saw that later in those games. We know the Warriors had a bunch of huge third quarters throughout the series, even more so actually early on. But then later in the series, that's when they really wore them down, is the second half, third, and fourth quarters. And they were able to just pull away, and that's ultimately what held true and what I really thought was a key to the series as it turned out. And defensively, too, you mentioned it, the Boston had 18 more total turnovers. You can't win that. In 6 games, in any series, really. It's just really difficult to do. So that's why the Celtics lost, a big part of it.
And something you were right about.
Well, that was it.
That was it, just the turnovers part.
But yeah, the bad part was me thinking that Game 6 Clay was looming.
Right.
Something happened. He played like crap. But what I'm happy about, besides just a pick, and that I did well, is I kind of saw what was going to happen in the sense that they were going to wear them down. I didn't predict everything. I didn't say everything was going to play out the way it did, like Wiggins stepping up like he did. But I did think Warriors are deeper. They're going to wear them out. That's what happened. Warriors won the last 3 games.
Now, before I go on with this topic, I want to remind you guys that your best bet for sportsbook and casino sites is betting.net. So head on over to betting.net. Now, to answer your question, Bob, before we move on to our next topic, putting a bow on the NBA season itself overall, one thing I was not a fan of was so many turnovers. We talked about this, I think, after game 3, 4, 5. I mean, both teams were just sloppy. It was ugly. And it wasn't even like, at times, like you could say, yeah, Golden State was playing the passing lanes really well in certain situations. And they were playing really good against Jason Tatum, and especially in the second half of games, especially in the fourth quarter, the last couple games of the series where Tatum pretty much disappeared for stretches. But damn, those turnovers, dude. You can't. It was like watching a high school game. You have 18, 19 turnovers a game. It's absurd. I get it. Some guys are balling out there, handling the rock. They're going to have, 4 or 5 turnovers, whatever. But as a team, 16, 17, 18, 19 turnovers. And it wasn't just for like 1 or 2 games. It was every damn game. One team or the other has friggin' 18 turnovers. It's ugly. Sloppy basketball. Hate it.
It also speaks to one of the things that Boston needs to address in the offseason. They need a true point guard. Now, they finally handed the reins to Marcus Smart this year. He did pretty well, but ultimately he's not necessarily a pass-first point guard. He is a solid passer. He still averages about 5 a game or even 6 during the regular season. He can handle the rock, but he's not an elite ball handler. They need someone that can really run that offense more. And, yeah, Smart can handle the ball, bring it up the court every now and then, but he shouldn't be the center of the offense at all. And obviously, and we see it. Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum handle the rock a lot, but I think they would really benefit from a pass-first point guard that can get 25 minutes a game.
And then one thing I want to say about, something good, something that I liked, whatever, about the finals. Boston can suck it.
Yes, Boston lost. They didn't need another championship. We don't need to see it. Granted, the Warriors have won plenty, and I know right now they're probably the team that NBA casual fans or fans of the other teams basically don't like because they're a dynasty. But us as New York fans, we're obligated to hate Boston teams. So
Boston, you can suck it.
Suck it.
So let's move on from the finals. I do want to put a bow on the NBA season itself. But before we do, I want to remind you guys that your top sportsbook comparison site is betting.net. Betting.net offers extensive reviews on the best sportsbooks out there. So head on over to betting.net. All right, Bob, let's put a bow on the NBA regular season, postseason, everything. I just want to touch on some things. Why don't you we're going to go down some quick topics, all right? Some rapid fire shit. You ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Biggest surprise of the season, positive surprise, player-wise, individual player, biggest surprise, pleasant surprise of the season. It could be a rookie who came out. It could be a whatever.
One that comes to mind pretty quickly is Moran. Now, he did win the most improved, so it's kind of an easy one. But just seeing that he's another potential superstar in this league. And the Grizzlies also won a lot. Now, they did have a good record even when he wasn't in the lineup, which was for about 15 games or so. It was talked about during the season. But just to see a young team that's on the rise that is being built organically, that's awesome to see. So it's not just the player and Moran. It's good to see a team like the Grizzlies in a small market succeeding. We saw how Golden State developed. Now, granted, they're not in a small market at all, but they developed it organically through the draft. Steph Curry being a number 7 overall pick in a draft. Klay Thompson, number 11. Draymond Green, a second rounder. Then you fill them with veteran pieces like Andrew Bogut and Andre Iguodala when they first started their run. So just to see a team like Memphis that could be built that way, drafting Moran, drafting guys like Desmond Bane and Jaren Jackson, who was a top 5 pick. So they drafted players that were even higher than where Curry or Klay Thompson went. So that's a young team on the rise, and I think that's a big takeaway for this year is just to see that there might be some new blood that we're going to see and get to enjoy, and Morant's leading that charge as a potential superstar.
All right, I like it. And now on the flip side, give me your negative. One big player surprise, but bad. You didn't feel quite right about them. You didn't like their individual performance on the season for one reason or another. What happened?
I'd have to give like co-players here, I guess, co-player awards. Okay. I think it's Kyrie Irving and James Harden. James Harden's been doing it for a few years, and so has Kyrie Irving. So it's really nothing new in a sense. But I think it reached all-time new lows this past year, because we saw how James Harden left Houston, looked like he wore a fat suit or just got fat, and doesn't care about his conditioning. So he forces his way out of there. Then he forces his way out of the Nets. So he's just a slug, and he's not the player he once was. Clearly, they don't want to give him a 4 or 5 year extension at all, nor should they. So that's ugly. It looks bad for Philadelphia. Not that the Nets are doing much better because they still have Kyrie Irving's dilemma to deal with, whether he's going to opt in or not, which he probably won't. Or at least he'll use as leverage. Maybe he will at the end of the day because it is a huge contract amount, and we'll get to that. But basically, Kyrie wins this for me, and is something that I look at negatively just because he finds so many reasons not to do his job, not to show up, not to play basketball. It's well beyond vaccination status, and we know that rule was crazy and made no sense. If you're forcing the home guys to be vaccinated, but yet visiting players can come in unvaccinated, it doesn't matter at all. The rule made no sense. It would only have made sense if maybe everyone who's not vaccinated coming in, whether you're on the home team or away team, can't do it. That's another story for another day, but that is part of what plays into this about Kyrie Irving. Also, a year or so ago, when he just disappeared and was showing up in like random classes online in a Zoom class, it was MIA. He showed up at a relative's party and just doing everything but play basketball. Eventually, he did come back. Part of it was the Nets caving, and he still missed plenty of games. He's always going to miss games. And so it's just a bad trend for the NBA. These kind of guys put a black eye in the league, even though there are a lot of young, talented superstars. And overall, they're still doing pretty well in the NBA. But these are problems. This makes the NBA look bad. There's no two ways about it.
So to that, I'm going to answer my question with this. My big surprise. It's a little. I'm cheating a little bit because it's supposed to be the individual portion of it. But my surprise of the season is this rookie class, because we knew how bad the 2020 class was. That's been established. Nobody was looking at that class thinking, "Oh, full of stars." Okay, we get it. Coming into this year's class, there were talks that Cade Cunningham was the number one pick, but in another year, maybe not. If it was a little, heavier at the top, like this year's class. Maybe Cade Cunningham wouldn't even be the first pick in this year's class, for example. Then you had guys like Mobley and Barnes at the top, and everyone had questions at the top. They had the potential. You saw it, but there were legitimate issues one way or the other for some of these guys. But, I mean, Cade Cunningham looks like a star in the making. He had a lot of good games down the stretch. I'm so glad I didn't trade him at our trade deadline in New Yiddy, our fantasy basketball league. I'm so glad I didn't trade him for a ham sandwich like Greg was trying to pull. He did well. Mobley did well. Wagner from Orlando? You had him on your team for a majority of the season. Wagner played well. Jalen Green did his thing. Like, all these guys showed flashes at different points, and I think that's awesome. That gives a lot of hope, not only for those franchises, but for the NBA moving forward.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. They looked really good this year. Jalen Green missed a lot of games early on and struggled with his shot and was very inefficient. But once he came back and got his legs under him, he was great to wind down the season. Mm-hmm. Cade made a late push. We had a great race. It was between Mobley and Barnes the whole year, and I said Barnes every time you asked me. I was right on that. Others I was totally wrong on. Thought the Nets and Lakers would play in the finals, but we can touch on maybe our predictions at some other point in the show. But yes, the class, we mentioned those guys. Josh Giddey looks like a potential star. Under. He can average or not average a triple-double necessarily, but he can go for a triple-double on any given night. That's how good of a playmaker he is. So definitely looks bright, this 2021 NBA draft class. There was a lot of big performances and guys that showed they can be an alpha on the team even, potentially.
That's right. So that's one thing. That's something that stood out to me, was how good these young players carry themselves. And I want to give props to Scotty Barnes, because I know I was talking about it all season, how I thought Cade was better. I thought Mobley was better. And then at the end of the day, it's Barnes who ends up at the top of the pile. I know it's just, an individual award, not a big deal. Plenty of rookies of the years in the past have amounted to nothing or been disappointing moving forward in their careers. But, I mean, kudos to Scotty Barnes, man. I was shitting on the man all year. Once Siakam came back, I wasn't convinced that Barnes was going to keep doing anything, because, I mean, Siakam's going to get 35 minutes a game if he's healthy, and the offense runs through him. So I thought Barnes was going to fall off, and he didn't. So kudos to him. I was wrong, and yeah. And then the thing that I didn't like, I'm going to sort of kind of work off what you said because you went off into Kyrie territory and stuff like that. And I'm going to say God and Harden and so on and so forth. I'm going to go with the Ben Simmons situation. It was unfortunate from the very beginning. And I know stuff like this doesn't really happen that often, that players opting out for a whole season is not a thing because of mental health concerns as opposed to an actual physical injury that requires rehab or rest or whatever the case may be. So it was weird. And I know, a lot of people, are us included, were not fans of the whole, I'm not mentally prepared yet. It sounds soft. It sounds not professional, which is what he is. I mean, this is an all-star caliber talent, one of the very best basketball players on the planet, getting paid a shit ton of money. And I get that sometimes in sports, athletes get the yips, a case of the yips, where it's a mental block. You do things incorrectly that you've been doing your whole life the right way. Your shot is just a little bit off, and it's just a mental thing. It's not anything physical. It's not that you're dealing with any pain, any underlying physical issues or anything like that, or even dealing with like a new team or a new system or something. It's literally just all in here. You're psyching yourself out. You're getting in your own head for one reason or another. So it was a little weird to hear at first that a guy's missing of his caliber and his importance to his team as an individual is dealing with that sort of stuff. But we're all humans, and people deal with different things and problems and life in different ways. And just because you're a multi-million-dollar professional athlete doesn't mean anything. You're still a person. So it was a little weird at first. It took some getting used to understand, but more athletes came out talking about mental health and stuff like that. And that's great. I don't think that's talked about enough. So much pressure goes on these athletes that they deal with a lot of things. So yeah, it was different. It was weird. And we took our swings at that man, but he sat out for his
What was the bad thing? What was the little?
Well, the bad thing is that we had to deal with this whole. He had to deal with this all season. That we had to hear the drama. I mean, we're in New York, Bob, so we hear about Ben Simmons. They were talking about Ben Simmons on the radio every single day, and then once he got traded to the Nets, it was every single show. It was every single show they were talking about this man, and it didn't matter what radio station it was. Even on ESPN, the show with Skip, what is it, Undisputed with Skip and Shannon Sharp. TV shows, radio shows around the country were talking about Ben Simmons and stuff. So the thing I didn't like was the off the court stuff, and it's not just with Ben Simmons. It's Ben Simmons, it's Kyrie Irving, it's James Harden, so on and so forth. It was weird. It was weird. It was unfortunate, and it took attention away from the game and the teams as it should.
Right. Everyone should get their mental health checked, especially if they're feeling that type of way. But for me, it was just Ben Simmons was full of shit because if we look at the timeline, we can just see through it. It was obvious to me. So, hey, I'm sure it bothered him. Don't get me wrong. But to take a whole season, it doesn't make any sense. Then he has a back injury. When did that happen? He wasn't playing any NBA games. Now he is going to get surgery or already did get it. So he did have a legitimate injury, but we found out about it after he was traded to the Nets, not like immediately after, but in the coming days or weeks after it. That's when we found out. But we rewind it back. We talk about the yips. He didn't attempt an easy layup or potential dunk late in the game against the Hawks last year. They wind up losing that game, losing the series. All the Philly fans were on him. Then we go to Doc Rivers, questioning him, I think in the post-game presser, or definitely in some kind of conference right after the season, saying, I don't know if he's a championship point guard. So that seemingly got in his head. That pissed him off. He wanted out, demanded a trade. They weren't having it. They wanted to get good value back on him. They weren't ready to give up on him either. And also, he was just hard to trade. A guy who can't shoot, seemingly has the yips, lack of confidence. Even though he's only 25, he's making a ton of money. So that's a huge factor right there. getting 30 plus million for the next 4 years. So that's an ugly contract when you have a guy who looks like he's not capable of shooting or getting even better. We talked about it for years, me, you, and Greg, just how this guy flatlined. He didn't get better year to year. If anything, we started to see him regress when he was actually playing. So you bring it to the season, doesn't play at all, eventually does get traded. It was an embarrassment for the league. It goes hand in hand with Kyrie and Harden, and I honestly forgot to touch on him, but I'm glad you brought it up because it is similar in that regard where a lot of these guys just don't play, particularly Kyrie and Ben Simmons, which is bad for the league, especially you're a paying customer. You want to go to a game. You want to see these best players, not get rested for load management or I just want to do my own thing or I have a mental block. It's just crazy to think of.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So let's move on. All right. Now let's go to the most disappointing and surprising team aspect of things. Bob, why don't you give me your most surprising team of the season in a positive light?
Right. Of course. So most surprising, it had to be the Grizzlies, but I know I talked about them already. But I'd say the Cleveland Cavaliers would have to be right up there too. Memphis was thought of as a potential playoff contender anyway, given how good John Moran is. Now, not everyone was necessarily picking them, but especially with 10 teams being eligible because of the play-in, I think a lot of people did have the Grizzlies lower down, not number 2, of course. When you look at the Cleveland Cavaliers, they were not projected to make the playoffs by damn near anyone. I don't think any of the three of us picked them. I doubt guys like Mike or Steve, even though they're not huge NBA fans, were necessarily picking them to make the playoffs either. But they had a nice little rise and another young team in a small market, which is good for the league. To see Darius Garland blossom before our eyes, unfortunately still missed a good chunk of games, but to see him blossom, Evan Mobley as a rookie we talked about, contributing, looks like a good young power forward center type for the modern NBA, can block shots, score, rebound. And then you talk about even Colin Sexton, who's not there. Maybe he winds up getting traded, but that's another talented player that didn't even play for them this year. So they're a good young team on the rise. They still have some questions to answer, but you got those two guys. Also, Jared Allen, before he got hurt, was outstanding on the year, averaging a double-double and getting blocks too. So that's a nice young team on the rise. They're the biggest surprise from the team standpoint to me.
You know, Bob, I'm a little disappointed. I think I gave you that layup, but I was gonna go with Cleveland as well because I know we were talking about Cleveland throughout the season, and I had asked you a bunch of times. Pretty much, I feel like every few weeks I asked you how you felt about the Cleveland Cavs moving forward. Do you think they were real? Was this a flash in the pan? And for the most part, you were skeptical. You thought it was nice that they were playing well and whatnot, but you were not really impressed. But you know what? I'm going to go with the Minnesota T-Wolves on this one. And I'm going to go there primarily because of Ant-Man, Anthony Edwards. He had an amazing season. He's the alpha on that team, which is great because Towns is not an alpha. He's a beta on a good team. So that's great. You got your alpha, you got your beta. Now you need a good Charlie. And if you're a team with two pieces like they have, you have a very talented two-guard wing player type who could score, produce his own offense, is athletic as hell, can swap it from anywhere on the court. And then you got a guy like Towns, a big man who can do it all. He's pretty much the modern NBA center, which is what you're looking for. Not so much defensively, but in the fact that he can help with distributing. He is a good player in the post. He can shoot the ball from three, and he can create his own shot as well for a big man. So all those are positives. They go into this offseason with a lot of momentum, I think. And I wonder how they'll deal with things with Russell and so on and so forth. But they clearly need a third piece, someone who can step up behind Towns and Ant-Man's. But the trajectory, the arrow is pointing up for them. If they can get a relevant number 3 option in there, whether it be another point guard who can handle the rock, besides Russell if they trade him or something, or if it's another wing or something like that. But they need another third piece, and they could be useful in the West. They could make some noise moving forward.
It should be Russell, really should be, but he hasn't been quite right for them. He's still a young player, but I just don't love that fit there. And it's weird because I would say, yeah, point guard would be ideal for them given what they already have. But maybe it's a 3-and-D wing or something like that they really need. Russell's a solid player, but not given the salary he's making. I really like that combo of Edwards and Cap, though.
Yeah, hell yeah. So, I mean, if you're building a team, ideally you want an elite guard who could score, and you want an elite big man. Every team would like that. You can run pretty much any offense if you have those two pieces.
But you'd rather have the big man be able to play defense too. So that is the problem. Towns, I think, has improved and gotten better over the years, but still, he's not there. He's not at even a great level yet. So that's the problem.
Now, before we give our disappointments team-wise, I do want to remind you guys that this show and The Grueling Truth is powered by betting.net. Betting.net is your best bet for finding the online casino or sportsbook that's right for you. So head on over to betting.net. Now, Bob, we've got less than 10 minutes left in this episode. I want to make sure we get off in time for Mike and his show and those guys coming on next at 9 o'clock. But let's give our team disappointments. And so you don't cock block me again, I'm going to go first on this one, and I'm going to go with the LA Lakers. I think that was the obvious answer. I'm pretty sure you would have went with the Lakers as well, so I wanted to do it. Now you got to pick something different, and you got to think a little bit. You'll have a moment while you go, while I go on. But I'm gonna go with the Lakers. It's obvious. This is a team that had championship aspirations. They won it in the bubble, which, regardless of how you feel about it, they won the shit. Okay, they won it. It's that simple. They'll go down in history books as champions. But they were butt this year. Anthony Davis was hurt, not quite right when he was playing. LeBron did his thing. He's still a top 10 player in the NBA. He's still carrying it, but it wasn't enough, and he missed a lot of games as well. And the team just wasn't quite right. Russell Westbrook and that experiment failed. The pieces around him were not quite right. Nobody stepped up. They had no bench. It was ugly. It just everything about it was bad. The coaching was bad. I'm surprised. What's his face? Head coach. Jesus Christ. There you go. Frank Vogel. We went in on this guy all season. I was surprised he lasted as long as he did, because it is LA, and LA has a tendency, like New York and big cities, to jump the gun a little bit when it comes to their teams being butt cheeks. And if you can't get rid of certain players, then you get rid of the coaches. That's the way it goes in the middle of the season. But he lasted longer than I thought, and they're my disappointment. Bob, what about you?
So I did have a few teams for this. Now, one of them could have been the Knicks, but they weren't expected to do quite as much as these other two teams. So I wasn't going to go with the Knicks, even though it is my favorite team, the hometown team here in New York. But there was a bigger disappointment in this area, and that was the Brooklyn Nets. So while I could have gone for the Lakers, it was between those two because they had the most expectations. I think I picked Nets over Lakers in the finals. I think you had Nets and the Jazz in the finals. So we were both picking the Nets to potentially win a championship this year, and they fell well shy of expectations. I think ultimately Lakers are the biggest disappointment because they didn't even make the playoffs, and they were 10th or 11th even, actually. The Nets did make the playoffs. They were 44-38. They were a 7 seed, but they got swept in the first round by the ultimate Eastern Conference champion, Boston Celtics. But they didn't play well at all. Durant in that series, or Kyrie, maybe one game each, they played really well. Otherwise, they were disappointed. And then you have the whole saga that we basically talked about with James Harden, Ben Simmons, Kyrie Irving, that everyone's talked ad nauseum, so I'm not even going to go into those. But also Joe Harris, a key shooter, key role player on that team, played only 14 games, had a foot injury that sidelined him for the rest of the year. They messed it up, and he had to get another surgery, so that's dicey at best. That looks really bad for them. Blake Griffin was only brought on to be a role player, same as LaMarcus Aldridge. They've clearly seen better days. Yeah, pineapples, ananas. It's bad. I hate it. It was ugly. As a Knicks fan, I don't mind it, but at the same time, I don't necessarily hate the Nets like I hate some Boston teams. So I still feel like they are a very talented team. They have Durant, who is a top 5 player, but the Nets were the biggest disappointment, and they got to fix a lot of things in the offseason. There's a lot of problems there, and it looks like they don't even have a championship window anymore.
They have no championship. They have no dick. It happens. So we are on the clock, as I said earlier, Bob. So let's move on to our next and final segment, which is rumors, and the NBA draft. The NBA draft is this Thursday. But before we do, I don't even know if I did this one yet. Did I do that one?
Probably.
You know what? I don't think I did, but I'm going to do it anyway, even if I did. Find the best place to bet for you. Betting.net offers expert and user reviews for every online sportsbook and casino in your state. So head on over to betting.net now. Bob, we have 5 minutes left. We are on the clock. It's go time. Let's go over some rumors. Let's talk about a little bit of NBA draft. So we're going to start right at the very top. Let's start with the Kings. All right. There's a lot of rumors going on with their draft pick. They're sitting pretty in the draft. They've got the 4th overall pick, but they're a weird team. They're kind of in limbo because they're not quite right, but they're not quite as that 4 slot says they might be. So they might trade that pick. There's several teams that are hunting for it right now, including the Knicks. Now, realistically, Bob, what do you think is more likely? They trade the pick or they keep it?
I think it's more likely that they trade it, actually. Now, I don't necessarily think it'll be to the Knicks because the Knicks can't have anything nice, as I talked about earlier. But I think they ultimately trade it because they'll get lambasted if they pick another guard, like they probably would if they're at 4, pick Jordan Ivey out of Purdue. Now, granted, they did trade Tyrese Halliburton at the deadline, but they still have De'Aaron Fox. He's clearly in the fold. They drafted Davion Mitchell last year. Not only just from a look standpoint, but they just obviously have so many other needs. Now, it might behoove them to still take the best player available. They can't find a potential suitor. We've also seen a ton of trades in NBA drafts over the last couple of years, so I do expect them to trade out of it ultimately and really try to solidify the front court instead with whatever pick they get.
Now, I agree with you when you said that they're more likely to trade it than keep it. But if they keep it, don't be surprised if Ivy is not the pick. Now, there's some rumors that Ivy is coveted by the Thunder, which I guess it kind of makes sense. We are in a guard league, and they could use another scorer at the guard spot. They do have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, but he's missed time with injuries. And
also, Josh Giddey's more point guard to me. I mean, you could put him at the 3 and just have him handle the rock, I guess, every now and then. But yeah. I feel like that's a weird fit.
It is a weird fit, but there's rumors that they like him. But anyway, if it's not Ivy at the 4 spot, a name to keep an eye on, according to ESPN's Jonathan Givony, is Iowa's Keegan Murray. Apparently, their Sacramento's new coach, Mike Brown, and Kings owner Vivek Ranadive both really like this kid. And if they stay put, Ivy might not be the pick. It might very well be this kid. Apparently, he had a team-organized dinner with Fox and Sabonis. So that's something very interesting. And it's something to keep an eye on. And apparently, Sacramento's front office exec, Monty McNair, is a really big analytics guy. And Murray is one of those players that analytics seem to love. So it's something to keep an eye out there. Besides that, there are rumors of certain players dropping. Is Paolo Banchero going to drop? Is Holmgren out of the top 3 potentially? Something crazy if someone falls in love with Ivy, let's say. Do you think there's anything to that, or should the top 3 picks in this draft pretty much in some order be Banchero, Jabari Smith out of Auburn, and Chet Holmgren?
I'll answer that question and then pose another one to you. Try to do it as quick as possible. I know that we're up against the clock, so I ultimately don't buy that any of them are really going to slide out of the top 3. I do think it'll be those 3 big men ultimately that get picked at the top 3. But I could see, say, Banchero, instead of being 1st or 2nd, slide to 3. I could see him maybe sliding out of that top 3 potentially, but still not far, not out of the top 5. So that's how I feel like it'll unfold. I still think those guys would be top 3. But my question to you is, who do you think is the best player in this draft? If you were the Magic, who would you take?
If I'm the Magic, I go with Jabari Smith. I know that their front office loves length. A lot of their draft picks have been longer athletic pieces, guys, developmental prospects. So a guy like Chet Holmgren is probably getting them really excited in a lot of different ways in their front office, especially with Mo Bamba being a free agent. But it's got to be Jabari Smith. Of all these guys, he's got seemingly the highest ceiling, the best scorer, athletic as hell, the best shooter of these three. And he profiles, at least defensively, someone who can rotate on pretty much any position. So that sort of versatility will help.
Yeah, I believe from a defensive standpoint, definitely has a really high ceiling and also just an athletic freak. And I think I agree with a lot of what you said. I just feel actually that it's Chet Holmgren. Now, he is a string bean. He's really skinny, but he will bulk up. But you don't necessarily need to bulk up to crazy levels in the NBA to be successful. I just think he has that playmaking ability, and he also can shoot the ball around the rim, drive. He can obviously pop a three. So he's just got a diverse game. And I just think actually he has the highest ceiling, even though Jabari Smith looks more like that NBA body that you picture having a really high ceiling. And I'd say if he didn't go to Gonzaga, maybe he goes to Kentucky, Chet Holmgren would have been the number one pick. He didn't. I don't think he'll be number one, but he certainly should be number 2 or 3 on Thursday night.
All right, final question before we go off the air. We are on the clock again, as I've said. So final question, Bob, is Portland making a pick, number 7 overall, or are they trading that with the hopes of adding a veteran player to slide in next to Lillard?
That is a really, really great question. At the moment, I'll say that they don't trade it. I think they do stay there. I think they might have a hard time finding a suitor that'll give them good value because teams will know they're just desperate to try to fit someone with Damian Lillard. I don't think that's the best move for them. I think ultimately they already traded McCollum. Damian Lillard should be on the move, as hard as that'll be for that fan base and for them to make that decision. But clearly, it's just not going to be a championship with Lillard in Portland. I think the writing's on the wall. So I think they draft a young guy that can either eventually replace him as a point guard or shooting guard, or they just take best player available regardless of where it is and stay at 7 ultimately.
I like where your head's at. And with that, we're going to put a bow on this. Before we go, I do want to remind you guys to head on over now and see for yourself. Betting.net makes it easy to find all of the legal online casinos or sportsbook. It's in your state. So head on over to betting.net. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. And again, I just want to throw out some names just because we are Knicks fans and I want to show them some love a little bit here. Some names that some players that they've interviewed leading up to the NBA draft. They slot at the 11th overall pick. Dyson Daniels, small forward from the G League. AJ Griffin, small forward from Duke. Oshai Ogbaji, forward guard from Kansas. Malachi Branham, shooting guard from Ohio State. And Mark Williams, center from Duke. And one more bonus one, Tari Eason. I'm a huge fan of this kid from LSU. Had a great year. Good defensive player. Lots of versatility. Can play small ball 5. Very, very good potential on Eason as well. Those are all the top prospects that Knicks have interviewed and worked out leading up to the draft. We'll see if they move up. They're rumored to be a favorite to move up to the 4th pick. And we'll see. Hashtag Knicks problems. So I want to thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of Shoot the J. You can follow us on Twitter. We are also on Instagram. Our handle is at DB Talking Sports. D as in Dan, B as in Bob. I handle the Twitter follow. I'll follow back. Engage with us. Ask any questions, comments, concerns, ideas, etc. Give us a follow. Give us a like. And we'll catch you guys next time. For Bobby Hunt, I'm Dan Kornhauser. See you guys later.